Well, it's been about a month since the last time I've done one of these updates going through hospitalizations throughout the US, so I thought now might be a good time to do it, especially with hospitalizations dropping and daily new cases dropping. Let's take a look at the context and see what are the patterns that we've been seeing throughout the course of the pandemic. So we have again every state in the country here from the when things first started back in March of last year till February of now, as of a few days ago. And I've grouped these based on which areas kind of correlate together. So there's this uh, group one that I designate as group one, that these are the ones that really got hit hard in the beginning back in March, and then saw recently a resurgence back in, you can see in New York, their cases started going up early November. You can see, of course, not peaking in terms of hospitalizations as high as they were in March and April, but certainly got up there to difficult levels to manage. New Jersey as well, you can see here. Same timing, early November, late October, early November started going up, peaked right around the Christmas season, and then started dropping down shortly after. Washington, D.C., you can see here, similar pattern. Connecticut, same thing, started going up early November, peaked actually before, like mid-December, I'd say, and then slowly started dropping since then. Massachusetts, again, started going up early November and peaked maybe around New Year's. Delaware, you can see the pattern there. Illinois actually peaked um, late November, early December, and has been dropping down ever since. And then Maryland, we have here. Michigan, again, peaked early to mid December. Um, Pennsylvania also peaked before the holiday season, before Christmas. Rhode Island here, same timing for their peak. And then lastly, I don't Louisiana is kind of an outlier. You saw all the rest of these, they really had nothing going on during the summer. It was in the spring and during this fall season that they went up. Louisiana is the only one that's really gone up with every phase during this thing, early and during the summer and then late. And one thing you will notice about each of these, a lot of people have been talking about holiday surge and how much the holidays contributed. You'll notice these areas, I don't see an effect from the holidays. If I'm perfectly honest, things started going up before Thanksgiving, and some of these places they clearly started dropping before the holidays, before Thanksgiving. Like over here, we're talking Thanksgiving time. Some of these places are already dropping down, which is interesting. Um, then the block two, these are the blocks that started going up in midsummer. They started increasing midsummer, then dropped down, and then started going up again during this winter season. So you can see Arizona here out of this group probably been hit the worst in terms of their hospitalization peaks. They peaked right around here, which was mid-January, and have been dropping ever since. But again, you'll notice they started increasing early November over here. Um, in California, you can see their increase started mid-November, peaked around the same time, mid-January, and have been dropping ever since. Florida, again, peaked around the same time. Texas, again, peaked around the same time. They were started going up a little bit earlier, maybe mid-October. They started increasing. Georgia, again, peaked around the same time. Mississippi, around the same time. Nevada peaked a little bit earlier, maybe late, mid December, late December. Alabama peaked around mid-January, same time. South Carolina, their peak. So you'll notice, uh, I'm not sure what's going on with this data because all of these started going up before the holidays, very clearly before the holidays, they were increasing. Um, I don't know if there was some other event that happened early November that triggered these increases in all these areas, and maybe the holidays sustained those increases, and then after the holidays were done, Then new cases and hospitalization started dropping down. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what to make out of this. E this is not quite the timing that I was expecting to see in this data. Then let's move into the group 3, which is the group that really followed this big South Dakota surge that you can see during that August period, September period when these areas all started going up. So you can see where South Dakota peaked in terms of their hospitalizations. Again, mid-November peak and have been dropping ever since. North Dakota peaked around the same time, been dropping ever since. Wisconsin, same thing with them. Montana, same thing with them. Their peak lasted maybe a little bit longer, but not much. Indiana, same thing. They've been dropping down a little bit more slowly, but they've still been dropping down. Iowa, again, peaked at the exact same time. Nebraska peaked at the same time. New Mexico, their peak the same time. Um, Ohio, their peak the same time as well. Wyoming, there you go. Minnesota, Kansas, they're kind of all over the place. I don't really like their data. Idaho, they're part of the problem is Kansas and Idaho, they're smaller populations, and so any fluctuations in the data make for big changes. But again, they're following the same pattern. Colorado, same pattern. Alaska, I don't know if really belongs in this group. I mean, they're in a completely different part of the U.S. But interestingly, they kind of went up and peaked around the same time and then dropped back down. So I don't think it had anything to do with South Dakota, but it's interesting the timing of it. Um, so that's really what I consider as group 3, the ones that really went up and down, aligning with South Dakota. And notice each of these, they really did peak before the holidays and been dropping ever since. Um, it's there was a part of me that was wondering maybe for these states, I know there was a lot of political rallies that were leading up into the election. Maybe that was what was sustaining some of these increases. And then as soon as election happens and political rallies stopped, maybe that's why these places are now going down now that they no longer have these mass gathering events. It's hard to say. And then the next group is kind of the group that's just been increasing steadily throughout, like Missouri. You can see they kept on going up until maybe about mid to late November, then finally peaked, and then have been finally actually started dropping down in January. Oklahoma, again, they've been increasing all the way up until January, and then finally started dropping down. Tennessee, same thing, been increasing steadily up to that point. Arkansas as well. Uh, Kentucky, more like Missouri, kind of peaked mid-November and then flattened out. Now maybe starting to see some signs of dropping. Virginia never really got quite as bad, but yeah, they're starting to go down too. Utah here, I know Utah was a struggle, but I think that was mostly because all their cases were all in one spot. But they look like they're starting to go down now too. Um, yeah, North Carolina, they finally hit their peak mid-January and are starting to go down. West Virginia as well. And again, you'll notice that they started going up really that mid-November time period, and then again peaking around the same time. Or again, not much will ever really happened in Oregon and Washington. You can see they never really got that much. Peaked around, maybe a little before Christmas, and have been dropping since. Hawaii, they've just been doing their own thing. That it kind of helps being an island and isolated from everything else. And then you've got places like Maine, New Hampshire. Again, same pattern. It started going up maybe mid-November, never really got that bad. Puerto Rico's been going down ever since December. Guam, they haven't shot back up ever since. They've dropped back down from their November spike. And then Vermont, nothing really ever happened in Vermont. They've really avoided this whole thing. Um, so that's where everyone's at right now. Um, Again, it's interesting to look at these trends. I mean, we can see where the new cases are right now. Check it out again for New York. You can see their cases are starting to go down. New Jersey, Washington D.C. Some of these places, Massachusetts, Delaware, Illinois. So the pattern is all everywhere. It's all really the same. Um, you've got the expected lag between when your new cases peak, your daily new cases peak, and when your hospitalization numbers peak. And most of these guys hit that peak a while ago. Louisiana hasn't quite dropped down yet. They've been weird ever since, really, for this whole thing. Arizona, of course, when you see hospitalizations dropping, you expect your daily new cases to drop down as well. California there, Florida, there's Texas, haven't quite dropped down yet. Georgia been dropping down. Mississippi been finally dropping down there. Nevada dropping down. Alabama, South Carolina, and then of course uh, the the South Dakota group. They've been dropping down steadily. So there's South Dakota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Montana, Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, New Mexico, Ohio, Wyoming, Minnesota, Kansas, Idaho, Colorado, and yeah, so that group, they've all been steadily going down ever since that peak. No observable effect from the holidays, as near as I can tell. What you might see is you see little weird blips like this where you drop down and then shoot back up. That's partly due to during the holidays, less people actually go in for testing. Um, so it's not that there weren't new infections during those days, it's that people generally don't go to the hospital to get tested on New Christmas Eve. But then afterwards they go in for their test. Um, so yeah, that's those. And then Missouri, you can see their cases been going down now, and and as we saw in their hospitalization numbers, now their hospitalizations are starting to drop down accordingly. Oklahoma looks like they might finally be on the downturn there. Tennessee, they look like they're on the downturn there. Arkansas looking good, dropping down. I mean, these are still a lot of daily new cases, but the fact that the trend is generally down is a good thing. Virginia looks like they're starting to go down. Utah starting to go down. So yeah, North Carolina, West Virginia, Oregon never really got that much. Washington down there. Hawaii again, they're in their own little world there. Maine starting to go down. New Hampshire, Puerto Rico, Guam, Vermont. They're saying that they're at an all-time high in daily new cases. It doesn't really mean much. You can see in comparison to everyone else. In terms of deaths, where are deaths still up? Um, so you can see New York, they're looking that they're starting to get ready to drop down now. The hospitalizations are starting to drop down. New Jersey flattened out. They haven't started dropping yet. Washington, D.C. haven't really started dropping yet, I don't think. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Delaware. Illinois has, of course, started to drop down. These other ones, um, uh, we need to maybe wait another week. Now that hospitalizations are starting to go down, then we'll see daily new deaths drop down accordingly. There's Maryland, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Louisiana hasn't dropped down yet in terms of fatalities. Um, the group two, like Arizona, California, Florida, Texas, they'll probably need another week or two before their daily deaths start dropping down. Texas there, Georgia, Mississippi, Nevada, Alabama there, South Carolina. You can see these ones still going up. They're probably expected to peak sometime around now and then start dropping in the next couple of weeks. Then in group three, of course, everything's going down. South Dakota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Montana. Um, yeah, I mean they'll be going down as well. Indiana, Iowa, it's been kind of all over the place, but yeah, expect that with hospitalizations going down, you kind of expect their fatalities to drop down as well. Nebraska there, New Mexico looks like they're starting to drop down now. Ohio hasn't yet dropped down. They look like they're level. Wyoming probably gonna start dropping down now. Minnesota definitely dropping. Kansas, I can never understand. I can't read Kansas. I have no idea what's going on there. Idaho starting to drop. Colorado definitely dropping from their peak. Alaska never really saw that much happening over there. Um, in the next group, you can see Missouri, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Arkansas. Since they've peaked more recently, you expect a little bit longer delay until their fatalities start dropping. There's Kentucky, there's Virginia there, Utah. North Carolina, West Virginia. There's Oregon. Again, Oregon and Washington never really saw much. Washington, you can see there's a brief little blip over here where the daily deaths become negative in a few places, and that's just because they overcounted in previous days. Now they're correcting on those days. Um, Hawaii, not much ever happened there. Whenever you see weird spikes like that in your deaths, where all of a sudden you've got a whole lot of deaths, that's usually a delay in reporting. And so what's going on there is it's not that a ton of people died right here. It's that there were a bunch of deaths in these earlier days that weren't counted. And then retrospectively, they look back and go, oh, all these were actually COVID deaths, and we just didn't realize it. And then they add them all in there at that time, and so that's why you get those weird spikes like that. Maine, you can see they look like there's their hospitalizations peaked, so I expect their fatalities to peak pretty soon. Puerto Rico, Guam, and then Vermont. Nothing interesting happening there. And that's it in terms of hospitalizations, cases, fatalities. It's been interesting to look at these numbers. These are not the timing of the peaks that I was expecting. Um, so let's keep an eye on this on the future and see. I'll try to put together a video on California specifically soon. But yeah, and it's so some people have speculated that some of the increases that we're seeing in some of these places might be associated with the spread of the new variants. Um, it's hard to say. I'll in one of my upcoming updates, I'll dive into mutations and variants, and we'll see if those could possibly explain. If these were caused by new variants, though, I don't know why they would peak mid-January. That's I feel like there's something that happened early November that triggered these increases in these specific locations. And then maybe the holidays were sustaining it. Now that the holidays are out, they're starting to drop down. But any event, that's what we're looking like now. So hope everyone is doing well, and we'll get some more updates of these in the future.